When I feel like I don't have the vocabulary or the word to create an excuse, the only thing I can do is move forward, is find a solution. Hi guys, it's JT here and welcome to the JT Leadership Podcast. A podcast where I take everyday challenges, simplify them and provide you with the tools to overcome any challenge. This podcast has one outcome, and that is to have a positive impact on your life by bringing leadership to your life. Season 2 of the JT Leadership Podcast is about a very important message. It is about something that affects every single one of us, and that is the importance of mental well-being. Throughout this season, I will be discussing why mental well-being is so important and some of the steps that you can take to help build a mentally resilient mind. Things that I've done, tools that I've done and seen other people do, which have had a profound impact and changed our lives. In today's episode, so part 2 of why building mental resilience is so important, I will be exploring techniques on how you can better understand what causes you stress, and then sharing techniques on how you can further develop and build your mentally resilient mind. Also, I will be tackling 2 of the most common forms of anxiety in the world today and how I overcame them. I will be building on episode 2, which is part 1 of building a mentally resilient mind, where I discussed why building a mentally resilient mind is so important and explaining what it actually means to be mentally resilient. Before I get into the episode and the questions that I'll be tackling, I just want to remind you of the definition that I came up with and shared with you guys in the last episode. So this definition is what is mental resilience, and it was the elasticity of our mind. And I use the analogy of a rubber band. So when you stretch a rubber band, not to the point that it breaks, but to the point where it's stretched, and then when you release it, it comes back to its normal mode of operation. And with that elasticity is when you stretch it more and more over time and let it go back, it eventually starts to grow, gets bigger. So I want you to keep that in mind for the rest of the episode. Mental resilience is the elasticity of your mind. Okay, so in today's episode, I'll be taking this a bit further, and I'm going to be looking at the following 4 questions. Question 1. How can you understand your stress triggers better? Question 2. Where do you want to be versus where are you now? Question 3. What are some of the tools that you can use to build a mentally resilient mind? And question 4. Overcoming 2 of the most common forms of anxiety in the world today. Right, before I proceed, I just want to make something very clear. I am not a medical professional, right? I'm not here to give you advice. What I want to share with you is the tools that I use to overcome these issues in my life and the positive impact they had on my life. So that even if you want to adopt 1 or 2 of the principles and give them a go, maybe they can positively impact your life too. If you are suffering from a mental health illness or issue, please seek a medical professional. Right, now I want to dive into question 1. Stress. Stress is something that affects every single one of us. Even saying the word stress, it might stir up emotions in you whilst you're driving a car and listening to this, or you're running, or you're walking, or you're sitting in the office and you hear the word stress. There is such a negative connotation associated to stress that as soon as we hear this word, it starts to create emotions and feelings within us that just make us just angry, frustrated, disconnected, disengaged. All of these feelings that are caused by stress. What I have found and what I wasted a lot of my time doing was trying to control the things that caused me stress. And I noticed that a lot of people do this. They try to control the things that cause them stress. This is very difficult. And I want to make clear, from my experience, don't waste time trying to control what causes you stress. So here are some examples. So you're driving down the road and someone cuts you up. Stress. You're walking into work, you're going on the tube. For example, if you work in London, you've got to get on the tube and it's rammed. Someone's got their arm up and your face is in their armpit. Stress. Someone sends you a shitty email at work full of passive aggressiveness. Stress. Every single one of us faces stress in a different way. This could be at work, this could be at home. We are all affected in different ways. I was wasting so much time trying to cut out those elements of my life that were causing me stress. Yes, some things you can do, like you can move an area or you can stop talking to a certain person that's causing you stress. But something else will crop up and that will cause you stress. I like to call these external influences. The reason they're external is because it's outside of your realm of control. If you think about a bubble, right? So if you're in a bubble and everything you can control is within this bubble. Now, can you control a person's decision to cut you up on the road? Or a person's individual decision to send a shitty email? You cannot. Now, for the people that know me, I'm a pretty chill guy. People seem to think that nothing really phases me. And to be honest, it doesn't. Not from the fact that things don't cause me stress, because things do. As I said, we are all affected by stress. However, I've understood what causes me stress and I've understood how I can control that and not let those external influences control me. As a quick side note, on the previous episode, I said to you that I eliminated the use of the word stress, right? And I did. And I don't use that word today. That is one of the tools and techniques, and I will cover that later. So when I use the word stress here, the reason I use the word stress is because stress is an emotion stirred up by external influences. And I want to show you how I overcame that. For example, I said that I'm a pretty chilled guy, but as I got older, I started to worry a little bit more about the future. And whenever I let myself slip into that mode, so where I was worrying and I was anxious, those ideas and thoughts would cause me stress. So I had to find a way to overcome that. And that's what I want to teach you now. At the beginning, we cannot control what causes us stress. These things cause an emotional stir within us because it's uncontrollable. But as I said before, we have a choice. We can either let our emotions control our behavior or we can control them. When an external influence stirs up that stress emotion, we need to identify and challenge that emotion because that allows us to then understand ourselves so that we can move forward and focus on what we can do in that moment to overcome that. And now I'm going to lead you onto the tool. So this is a tool that I use, and this is what I call understanding your stress. In order to take the next steps, I need you to be open with yourself. If possible, do this exercise in a distraction-free environment. For example, if you're at work and you want to go into a meeting room, book a meeting room and do this in silence, do it by yourself. If you're at home and you've got family, ask them for 5 minutes just so you can do this alone. Go sit in a room somewhere, go sit in your bedroom. If you're driving, sometimes this is a good time to do it because if you're alone driving, turn off the radio. Don't turn this off because this is the podcast. I will talk you through the questions so you can pause it at any moment. Just be safe whilst you're driving. I'm going to take you through a series of questions and I want you to give yourself a rating from 1 to 10. So if 1 is carefree, 5 is good pressure, and 10 is highly stressful, you can rate yourself against the questions. Okay, so I want you to now imagine the environment that you believe is causing you stress or the environment that you want to carry out this exercise in. This could be a work environment, this could be a home environment. I want you to create a vivid image in your head. Really imagine you're there. Place yourself there. If it's a work environment, place yourself at that desk in front of your computer. Who is around you? If you're at home, place yourself in that location. Is it in your living room? Is it in your bedroom? Where is that environment that you believe causes you the most stress through external factors? And now go through these questions. Question 1. Describe how you feel in that environment. Question 2. How does that description make you feel? Question 3. When things change, how do you feel? Question 4. What is your relationship like with the people in that environment? And question 5. If you were to tell another person about that environment, how would you describe it? Right, so you can pause the podcast, you can go back and listen to the questions again, write them down, take a note on your phone. I will put the questions in the notes, but you need to now rate yourself. So like I said, from 1 to 10. So for example, how does that environment make you feel? So if you're in that environment and it's a 2, yeah, it's fine. I'm pretty okay, pretty carefree, it doesn't really get to me. Or if it's a really highly stressful environment and it's a 9 or a 10. Once you go through these series of questions, like I did, you'll start to build a picture of what that environment is and how that causes you stress. Which brings us on to the next series of questions. This is a 2-part question. Question 1. Now go on further to describe why each one of these questions, so the previous questions, makes you feel this way. And then narrow down what it is specifically that causes that feeling. Right, again, so pause, go back, I will put the question in the notes. But when you go through these questions and you score yourself, you start to build a real honest picture of the environment that you believe is causing you stress. But then by narrowing that down, you start to identify what the stress triggers are. For example, if you're at work, is the stress trigger an email whilst you're trying to focus on something? Whilst you're at home, is the stress trigger your partner disturbing you whilst you're trying to focus on something or watch TV or a film, for example? What this does now, this gives you that picture. And it gives you a picture of triggers, so stress triggers that you can control and that you can't control. So remember that bubble, that sphere of influence. There's the external influences, these are things that are outside of your control, and there's the internal influences. These are the things inside your control. Now what we're going to do is we're going to understand where you are versus where you want to be. Now you've got the rating. What you can do, so if you're in a really highly stressful environment, if it works easy for you, flip the numbers over. So 1 is really stressful and 10 is carefree. Whatever builds a easier, more workable solution or image in your head, right? Now, say you're a 10, you're really, really stressful, everything's causing you stress triggers. There's 10 items which are internal influences, and there's 10 items which are external influences. You need to now compare yourself against where you want to be. So I'm going to break this down into 2 parts, your internal and your external control. Let's look at the internal first, because this is something that you can control. Right, so let's use that example of having 10 internal triggers, things within your control. Now, where do you want to be? Do you want to reduce that number down from 10 to 2? Or do you want to actually get rid of them all together? Right? Ideally, you want to get rid of all those internal triggers gone. You want them out of your life because you don't want to be responsible for your own stress. Now, if you agree with me, then you want to move forward with this. You want to understand that's where I am, there's 10, where I want to be is 0. Now you need to ask yourself, what can I do? What steps can I take to bring that 10 down to 0? I'm going to give you an example of myself. When I was in my work office environment, it was quite a chaotic office. There was somewhat 100 plus people in one area of the office. Now, if you're trying to focus on something, really focus on a task or trying to be creative or trying to get something done, having somewhat 100 people talking around you at the same time, so people having conversations about work, people having social conversations, people are just complaining in general, some people being positive, all this mixed emotion, energy around you, it's a distraction and it stopped me from focusing. And when I can't focus, when I struggle to get into my flow, that's when this stress emotion started to stir up in me. Now that was something that I could control. So what I did was I said, okay, this is where I am. In this environment, it's not working. Where do I want to be? I want to be able to easily switch into my flow when I want to focus on something. So what I would do is I would go and work in a different area of the building when I needed to work on something and be in a flow. I do the same at home. If I need to get into a flow, I go work in my office. Every one of these triggers, internal triggers, is personal and unique to you. You need to understand going through that rating system and then narrowing down the specifics of what causes you stress so that you can identify the steps. Be open with yourself. Be honest. What can you actually do? For example, if Instagram notifications is causing you stress whilst you're on the phone, turn them off. You can do it. And as long as you commit to it, you can take control of those internal influences. Right, now this brings me on to the second area, the external influences. So these, imagine the bubble again, these are things outside of your reach, outside of your control. This was the example of someone sending you a shitty email or someone cutting you up in the middle of the road. Things that you cannot control. But when these things take place, they stir up that stress emotion that makes you angry and frustrated. You need a mentally resilient mind to overcome that. This is where the tools come into play. If you've read my book or you've gone onto my website and read a little bit about me, you know that I work in the construction industry. This is a very high pressured, highly stressful environment. And I've been in this industry since I was 18 years old. I've seen men and women be broken by this industry. They have literally broken down and completely given up. Some people have quit their career altogether. They've quit the industry. I've seen people explode, try to have fights, all kinds of things I've seen in the workplace. And I said to myself at quite a young age, I can't let that happen to me. I won't allow myself to be affected by the external pressures. I need to come up with a way to overcome this problem, which led me on to the journey of mental resilience. And along that journey, there are four really powerful tools which help me at every stage. And not only did they help me in the workplace, they help me in my home life too. So no matter what element of my life I'm in, and something is trying to cause me stress, something outside of my control, I'm able to take control. Remember what I said, you are in control, nobody else. You are in control of your own feelings. Now, people can say things, people can do things. They try to stir up a feeling or an emotion in you that creates that anger and frustration and stress. But you are in control. You decide whether you're going to let that external influence affect you or whether you're going to control it. Okay, so what are the four tools? Tool number 1, self-awareness. Number 2, reframing. Number 3, changing your language. And number 4, focusing on you. The first step to any form of control and personal growth is self-awareness. As we looked at in questions 1 and 2, it's understanding what causes you stress. It's understanding what is the internal and external influence. This is self-awareness. Once you're aware of this, you can do something about it. And in order to do something about it, you can use various methods. The method that I've come up with that really works for me is the 3 A's. Attention, affirmation, and action. And if you've read my book, Managers Are Not Leaders, which is available on Amazon, right in the back there's an element on taking the lead, which is all about taking control and taking action. If you haven't read it, go onto Amazon, search Managers Are Not Leaders. It's available on ebook and paperback. Have a read. The second tool is reframing. Now, this is such a powerful tool. I help people do this when I coach them through certain scenarios. It's looking at the situation and reframing it for a positive situation. This could be anything. It's finding the positives in every situation. Tool number 3, changing your language. Now, this is eliminating the use of negative language. Like I mentioned this earlier on, and I mentioned it in the previous episode. Eliminating the word stress. I just stopped using it in my vocabulary. And I found that actually, when I stopped using it, I felt stressed less. Because I didn't have a word to describe it. I stopped using words like worry. Now this is how I move forward with this situation with language. When I feel like I don't have the vocabulary or the word to create an excuse. The only thing I can do is move forward, is find a solution. Actually, you know what? Use that tool. It's so powerful. Stop using negative words. When you find that you don't have a negative word, you'll find it more difficult to come up with excuses, and then all you're left with is a positive, forward-thinking solution. And then the fourth tool, this is focusing on you. Far too often, we self-sacrifice by putting everybody else first. But what is the point of helping somebody else if you're crumbling inside? Take, for example, when you go on an aeroplane and they do the safety briefing at the beginning, and they say to you, when the oxygen masks drop, look after yourself first. Even over children, they say put your own mask on first and then help other people. Because what use are you to anybody if you are crumbling inside yourself? When you decide to put yourself first, even for a short while, try it for a week, 2 weeks, then go on to a month, then on to a year. When you put yourself first, you will see that you will start to block out all these external influences around you. Take, for example, the car cutting you up on the road. Okay, someone does it. But if you just focus on your driving and reacting well to that situation, and then reframe that situation and think, actually, I reacted pretty well to that. I could have had an accident, but I didn't. Well done me. You've changed your language. Rather than negatively swearing at the other person, you've rewarded yourself. Honestly, the power of positive language can have such an incredible effect on you as a person. There are studies been done about this. Positive language works. Why? Because we have been conditioned over the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years to focus on the negatives. The negatives are all around us. They're on our phones, they're on our laptops, they're in the media, they're on TV, they're in the words that we hear from all the people around us. And by being surrounded by all that negative energy, it creates issues, internal issues within us. Which means that all we do is we end up talking about the negative stuff and we get sucked into that environment. Why? Because it's easy. It's easy to complain and it's easy to talk about the negatives and moan. What is tough is to remain positive. That's why some of the most successful people in the world train themselves to always focus on the positives. That's the reframing part of the tool and the positive language part of the tool. Incredible stuff, right? It's really helped me and I know it can help you. Which brings me on to question 4, right? So the 2 most common forms of anxiety in the world today, how I experienced them, and how these tools helped me, how my mentally resilient mind helped me overcome these forms of anxiety. So what are the 2 most common forms? Around 6 in 100 people suffer from a form of anxiety, and around 3 in 100 people suffer from a form of a phobia, so a fear. Now, why do I want to talk about this? Why is it so important? Right, okay, so I don't want to keep plugging my book here, but in chapter 1, I talk about how we've moved into a world of intangible assets. We've moved away from tangible skills to intangible assets. In simplistic terms, the world now operates with our minds more so than our hands. And that is why these 2 issues are so important, because if everything operates with our minds, the world, everything we do operates through our minds, and we let these 2 issues control us, it could cripple our future. It could cripple our potential. And that's why I want to just share with you how I overcame them. And you know what? These tools were so powerful and I know they can help you. No, again, I'm not a medical professional. If you are suffering from these issues, please seek professional help. However, just want to share with you the tools on how I overcame these. So number 1, so general anxiety. I discussed earlier in the episode how my own experience, so as I began to get older, I was more worried about the future. Worry is a form of anxiety. I had, and I still do, have the usual worries that most people have. Do you have enough money? Will I be doing what I love in the future? Where will I be living? Would I be able to afford the house that I want? Will I be able to drive the car that I want? Will I be able to travel to the countries that I want? All those things this is why it's general anxiety. These are all the things that people suffer on a daily basis. This is what we all experience, right? What made this more pronounced for me or more worse for me was the introduction of social media into my life. Now, I'm not against social media because social media can be used in the right way. Like, for example, podcasts, or if you've had a look at my page, PM Growth, I only post content on there which I know can have a positive impact on someone's life. And there's a lot of stuff on there where you're just scrolling and scrolling, and you end up comparing to these lives that don't really exist. And introduction of that really started to make this issue more pronounced for me. So how did I overcome this? This is probably one of the most important tools that has helped me today. This is focusing on now. In my experience, we suffer anxiety from two forms: thinking about the past or thinking about the future. For example, the past, we look at what we have done and we're worried about how it's going to affect our future. And when we think about the future, we worry about everything that we haven't done and how it's going to affect our future. So when I looked at this and said, okay, what can I do? I'm thinking too much about the future. I'm thinking about everything that I haven't done. Does this cause regret? No, I don't want to feel like that. So all I can do, all that's left, is to focus on the present. Be right here, right now. Whether you do this through meditating or you want to control your breathing, you want to just close your eyes and think for a moment. The way it works for me is I close my eyes and I think, what can I do right now? I talk to myself. I ask myself these series of questions. Okay, what do I want? What is it that I'm worried about? What can I do right now to help me overcome that? Or if, for example, what am I worried about in the future? If it's the fact that I want to build this lifestyle so that I can go and I can travel and I can do X, Y, and Z, then what can I do right now that can take me to that point? What is one thing that I could do right now? And the same applies for you. If, for example, you're worried about not having enough money next year, what is something that you can do right now to help you reach your goal of having enough money? So whether it's a pay rise or promotion, could it be having a discussion with your boss? If it's buying your first property, could it be not to go out drinking this weekend and perhaps saving your money to put towards that property? There's so many ways that this can be applied to your life, your unique life. But focusing on what you can do right now will have a massive impact, because it did for me. And the second one, phobias. So this is fear. So for example, with me, earlier in my career, I had a fear of speaking to what I believed were senior authoritative figures. Now, I don't know why that is. That could be from my upbringing, from the culture, so the Indian culture, where you don't really question what your elders say. And I had this fear that, well, should I be saying this to a manager or the person who's going to give me a pay rise or a client? So again, I needed to find a way to overcome this. And the way I looked at fear is just something that I haven't overcame yet. So it's just something along my journey. It's just another challenge. For example, if I wanted to jump out of a plane, of course, it's terrifying. By the way, I haven't done it yet. It's on my bucket list. But when I do it, I know I'm going to be terrified, but it's a challenge that I just need to overcome. So the tool is very, very simple. And you've probably heard this 100 times in your lifetime. Just try. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't do, you don't experience. The main message of mental resilience and the journey that you are on to mental resilience is that you are in control. Right, okay, so that brings us towards the end of the episode, and it's been a fantastic 2-part episode, the journey to mental resilience. As always, a quick summary, recap of what we've spoken about today. So question 1, how can you understand your stress triggers better? We spoke about this. We spoke about going through a series of questions to describe your environment, rating them from 1 to 10, so from carefree to highly stressful, and then narrowing down the specifics to understand the external and the internal stress triggers that you can be faced with. Question 2, where do you want to be versus where are you now? Right, so that is understanding, okay, you know what your triggers are, internal and external. So look at the internal. Set yourself a goal. How do you get yourself from that having those internal triggers to having none? And then the external triggers. So question 3, these are the 4 tools on building a mentally resilient mind which can help you deal with these external triggers. There's a self-awareness, reframing, positive language, so changing your language, and focusing on you first. And then question 4, I just went into 2 of the most common forms of anxiety, so general anxiety and phobias. And I spoke about how I overcame those and how you can too. So general anxiety, by focusing on now, focusing on the present. And then phobia, so fear. The only way to do it is by trying it. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't try, you don't experience. Remember that view on fear that I explained to you. Fear is just a challenge along your journey that you have not overcame yet. Wow, I love doing the episode about mental resilience and the journey to building a mentally resilient mind. It's something that's really important to me, and I know that the tools that I've shared in part 1 and part 2 can really help you and help you on that journey to building a mentally resilient mind. Now, if you are looking for someone to help you along that journey and take you from where you are now to where you want to be and see results, then you might want to experience a coaching session with me. As you can see, a lot of the tools that I've shared with you here, you might look at and think these are quite difficult to do. So a coaching experience with me will help you see the results and get you from where you are now to where you want to be. If you are interested, you can find the link to contact me at my website, www.pmgrowth.co. I feel privileged that you've taken the time to listen to this episode. I know it will have a massive and positive impact in your life like it did with me. Thank you very much for listening. This is JT signing out.